Hey, everybody. Welcome to Fresh Take from What Fresh Hell Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. This is Amy. Today, I'm talking to Dr. Morgan Cutlip. She is an author and relationship expert, experienced and trained in translating psychological theory and research into practical, accessible, and actionable advice, which she shares with her clients and followers on social media at Dr. Morgan Cutlip through her Love Thinks podcast and on her blog. She is the author of Love Your Kids Without Losing Yourself and the book we're going to be discussing today, A Better Share: How Couples Can Tackle the Mental Load for More Fun, Less Resentment, and Great Sex. Welcome, Morgan.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So let's start with the balloon story, the straw that broke the camel's back. Tell us. It's very familiar. It will be very familiar, if not in the particulars, the general of what happened in your house one day.
So this was around holiday time. So in our family, that's when all of our birthdays sort of just kind of collide with Thanksgiving, with all of the Christmas planning, at least in our family. And then also we had a big trip with my in-laws coming up. And so our son's birthday was coming up. And I remember just this tension and this intensity that I was experiencing, just overwhelmed by all the planning, all of the thinking, all of the decisions. My husband naturally picked up on it and asked me, what can I do? What can I do to help? And so I said to him, I want you to handle the balloons start to finish for Roy's birthday. Primary colors, put in a baseball, a number 8, take care of it. And he's like I always joke he's like Emmett from the Lego movie. Like he just wants a set of instructions and then he can handle it. So he's like, done, got it. So the story goes, I'm laying in bed and we're about 2 days out from the party. And I just wake up with this overwhelming kind of swirling in my brain, wondering if he got everything handled, if the balloons were actually handled. He had not even mentioned them. No questions, no nothing since the first discussion we had. So that morning, I woke up, I go upstairs. He's on the couch where he normally sits in the morning, drinking coffee on his computer. And I said, hey, I just feel kind of worried. And I probably wasn't this calm. I think I was probably like a little bit intense. I was like, I just feel a little worried you didn't actually handle the balloons. And his response was, yeah, just tell me when and where to pick them up. And I say in the book, it was like the blue screen of death on a computer. Like I just lost it at that moment and I'm usually pretty collected in how I respond, pretty thoughtful. And I just was like, are you kidding me? Like, really? All of the things I'm thinking through, and you thought I was doing this too. You said you had it start to finish. So we kind of went round and round, which I think is a really kind of relatable conversation where he was sort of saying, I didn't have the details. You have really high standards for our parties. I thought you would have a real particular opinion about the balloons. I actually didn't this time. He wanted more details. I felt like he should have asked me if he had questions. Stop being passive about it, which is a big complaint of women, of their partners. It's this passivity in the
Yeah.
home and family life. And so we went round and round. I actually wrote that story in the book about 3 days after the actual argument. And I remember taking my printing it out and bringing it to my husband, it was still fresh, and saying to him like, hey, I'm thinking of opening the book like this. Like, how you feeling about
I've been
it?
there, right? So this is in the book.
Just so you know. But he's a good sport about it.
Well,
Yeah.
you do a good job of explaining, right? That what
Mhm.
that I think everybody listening who's a default parent's like, well, you said start to finish.
Yeah.
And then but then there is another perspective. It's like, but you've always handled this before, and in the past you've assigned me tasks and I've done them and I've helped, right? And
Yeah.
so to really do things over, you needed a plan. You're very generous that there are two valid perspectives here when you really come to think about it, and that doing things differently is going to take a little more strategy and planning. And that gave you the idea for the book, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the idea of the book came about much, much sooner, but I think, we have a pretty good share in our relationship. But I think the story, I mean, this is not that long ago, the story, but it highlights that even when you have a good share, you're going to continually have to be tweaking these things in your relationship because there's so much nuance when it comes to the mental load. And I am generous in this book, especially in that story to my husband. And some the mental load is a charged topic,
Sure.
and I think being generous sometimes can feel a little bit difficult, especially for women, because it is a topic that can bring up such rage and frustration and anger. And I solidly take the perspective that if we want to achieve the end result, which is a better kind of like distribution of who does what, a more involved partner who's in the know of how the home and family life functions, then we have to approach this topic with a little bit of generosity, with really taking the mental load and positioning it as the enemy in our relationship instead of our partner. And that is
Mm.
the most effective and efficient way to get to the end result, because the reality is when it comes to this part of relationship change, women want their husbands or their partners to change. Like ultimately that's what we're wanting. We want the mental load to shift and that they're going to make changes. And if we're going to be stepping into that conversation, we have to do it in a way that they're going to hear it, so that ultimately we get the support, the care, the initiative taking, and the emotional safety and security that we need in our
Yeah,
relationships.
that is the hard part. I mean, I think
Yeah.
anybody listening, the average listener to this podcast is the default parent in their
Yeah.
household, and they're very clear on what the mental load is. And we get questions often on like, I know what it is. I've read Eve Brodsky. I
Yeah.
understand. I'm soaking in it, as we say. But how do I explain this to my partner without the default response, which you talk about in the book,
Yeah.
was like, "Hey, I do a lot around here that it feels personal for the person who maybe hasn't done as much," and then the productiveness of the conversation just immediately gets switched off. Either they dismiss what you're saying or they
Mhm.
get hurt by what you're saying.
Mhm.
And so, how do you approach this conversation in a more productive way?
Yeah, this was my big sort of goal of the book, because what I love Eve Rodsky's book Fair Play. I think it is the most genius solution
Hmm.
to delegating responsibilities. And her and I spoke actually, as I had already finished my first draft, but we spoke and she's like, here are the missing holes or the gaps in the conversation. So a lot of times when she'll bring it up, it's met with defensiveness, dismissiveness, or this hardship Olympics. And it's like, why are we competing over who's more tired or who has it worse? And so the conversation never even gets to the place of delegation and negotiation. So I really wanted to support relationships from that front. So a couple of just strategies. One is what I sort of touched on already, which is that when you enter the conversation, try to position the mental load as the shared enemy.
Right.
So it might sound something like, you know, there's something that's been on my mind and bothering me for some time now. And is this a good time to talk about it? They always say it's a good time, even when it's not a good time, but it's helpful to ask. That's my experience, at least. Is like, they're like, yeah, it's great, because they don't want to wait. What you're going to say. And and then you'll say something along the lines of, you've probably noticed how overwhelmed I am, how stressed out I am. I'm tense a lot more than I ever imagined I'd be as a mother and as a member of this, in our family. And I've realized it's something called the mental load, and I want to define it for you. And so hopefully at this point, it's kind of remaining pretty neutral. And you say the mental load is just this overwhelming, never ending onslaught of tasks, of research, of emotional labor. I can define the mental load in a minute if you want. That is just never ending, that we both carry around in our minds, but I carry the bulk of it for our home and family. And I realize it's really impacting me. And as a couple living in this modern day with all of the things we have on our plate, the cost of living, the pressure to be productive, the distraction of our devices, all of the chatter of the experts out there, we are doing and trying to navigate so much more than is even possible for two people. And it's really taking a toll on me and our relationship. And I want to talk about how you and I can come together to navigate it differently so we both feel good in our relationship. So just the framing of the conversation in that way can start it off on a much better path than coming in like, you don't help me enough. You don't do enough.
Right.
How come you don't see it? What's your problem?
Even that, the framing is still off. You don't help, they're not helping, right? And
Yes.
enough means you're in charge. It's still a
Yes.
framework in which you need to
You
get
own
better
it.
at delegating. That's not the point. You make a really good point in the book that the enemy is socialization. It's not why doesn't he or why do I? It's the way that we're raised. I wrote a book called Happy to Help about how women
Yes.
are conditioned to be helpers. And so that's what we bring to it. And then you make the excellent point that men are socialized to be resistant to emotionality at all, and certainly criticism. And so that's
Yeah.
what
And
they're bringing to it.
I think in many ways, and I know there's a lot that goes into how we kind of end up in our roles and who's managing what, but in many ways, the game is just sort of rigged. So we're existing in the system where we're sort of evolving faster than we've been kind of set up to
Mm.
exist in our relationship. So yeah, like I love your book, by the way,
Oh,
but
thanks.
women are taught to self-sacrifice for the sake of our relationships. And so we enter into family life prioritizing an entirely different set of things. This is one big comeback that a lot of partners say that's really frustrating is, oh, her expectations are too high. She makes things harder on herself than she needs
Mm-hmm.
to. But when you understand that part of why we have really high expectations for home and family and how we raise our kids is because we're judged around these things.
That's right.
Society holds us to high expectations. I
Right.
took my son to an event at his school. It was in the evening. I'm in Southern California, so it's all relative, but it was kind of cold and it was raining. And I said to him, grab a coat. He goes, I don't want to wear a coat. I was like, dude, just grab a coat. And he goes, Mom, if I take a coat, I'm not going to wear it and I'm going to lose it. And then you're going to be upset that I lost my coat. And I was like, oh, appreciate your self awareness. And that's accurate. And I go, but all of the people working at this event are going to wonder why his mom didn't make him wear a coat. Nobody's going to ask why his dad didn't.
Right.
So we are living in two different worlds. And so if our partners can understand, it's not necessarily that we have the super high expectations and we love making things harder on ourselves. It's that we are really set up to have to meet these high standards because we are judged by society, just like men are held to different standards around providing and protecting financial and physical security. They're supposed to be sort of completely independent, unemotional, self-sacrifice in terms of their entire existence for their family and loved ones. So it's, we are really on two different trajectories and we have to understand one another's perspectives so we can depersonalize some of these differences.
So I wanted to talk about the surveys that you did. You talked to a lot of women about how they felt about the mental load, how they defined it, how it was playing out in their households. And one very significant finding you had is that it deeply affected the respondents' desire or need for intimacy. Tell us about that.
Yes. So I had suspected this was the
Right.
case.
Like it's a
And
joke, but is it true? Right.
yes, exactly. And so when I surveyed around 536 women, and then I interviewed men and women. And I had a ton of places on the survey where they could also just kind of answer questions, like open ended questions. And so in the survey data was like something like 78% or 80% said it dramatically impacted their desire of their partner. But then when you look in the comments, it was wild to read some of the ways that their attraction to their partner was really impacted by their inability to talk to their partner about the mental load, to feeling like they're completely on their own in their relationship. A lot of them said they had lost complete respect. They felt like they had another child in the home, which is a common dynamic that starts to develop around the mental load. And then you see in just other actually like peer-reviewed research studies, we're seeing more and more come out about the impact of a feeling you're in an inequitable relationship on your desire for sex. And I think one really interesting finding that I read about was that, and just makes common sense. The more inequitable a woman feels her relationship is, the less desire she has for sex. But when they looked a little bit deeper, they found that her generalized desire wasn't impacted. So it's not like women, a lot of times we're like, oh, we just, became a mom, I lost my desire. Maybe there's a lot of factors here. So I don't want to make this too simple. But when they looked a bit deeper, it was just her desire toward her partner. Generalized
Right.
desire was okay. She just didn't want that guy. She didn't
Right.
want him. And I think that should be a wake up call for our significant others. You
Yes,
know,
that is. And it's the data. I mean, on the one hand, it's like, well, no duh, we've all heard that joke, but it's true. And so
yeah.
it's worth underlining, and it's worth not feeling bad about, and it's worth bringing to the table that we want a better relationship. We're on the same side of the net. The goal is a better relationship. The enemy is this mental load that gets in the way for both of us. And that if we can improve this, our entire relationship will improve. And if we can't improve this, then our entire relationship will continue to suffer from it. I mean, it seems like it's a pretty neutral way to say this is just how it is.
Yeah, and unfortunately, sometimes the neutral way still stirs up this defensiveness and this hurt. But it's exactly right. The mental load is a relationship. It's a societal and all of
Mm-hmm.
these types of issues. It's a systemic issue, but it's also a relationship issue. It will slowly erode connection, respect, trust, closeness, and intimacy. And so dealing with it, really taking this part of the relationship seriously is so incredibly important for both partners.
Another thing you talk about in the book that I thought you sort of took apart, really successfully in a way I hadn't thought about before is I think we all kind of walk around, or many of us, with this sort of internalized, if your relationship was great, then you wouldn't have to talk about it. You shouldn't have to talk about the mental load. You shouldn't have to talk about, geez, I'd like our sex life to be better than it is. If your relationship were healthy, it wouldn't need discussion. Therefore, that we need to discuss this means our relationship isn't healthy. And we really need
Yeah.
to question that.
Yeah. I think this sort of core belief system gets in the way of having a lot of productive conversations in our relationships. And it is exactly what you said. If our relationship was healthy, we wouldn't have to talk about it. And we've sort of been programmed with this belief that relationships are intuitive. We say a lot, like even in dating, we'll say a lot like, well, if it's meant to be, it'll be, or it is
Right.
what it is. These sort of
Right.
passive approaches to relationships. I think the other thing I mentioned in the book is the words "can we talk" in dating often mean you're going to break up. And so then it's like
Yes.
we have to do this
Right.
entire like flipping of the script when we're in a committed relationship so that we can talk about it regularly. I think we don't often have a lot of role models that show us what healthy resolution of conflict looks like. And so we enter into the relationship sort of being at the peak, at a high. It's easy in the beginning. And then you need to start talking about it because, like any other aspect of life, it's going to be pulled toward disconnection. There's not any part of life that we don't regularly have to maintain. If you have a plant, you have to water it. If you have a car, you have to change the oil. If you work, you have meetings where you touch base and you make adjustments. So I believe that we really have to absorb this belief that our relationship, because life is busy, things are going to pull us toward disconnection, things are going to always be kind of interrupting our ability to stay close. Our relationship is always operating at a deficit. That doesn't mean anything's wrong. That's just life. That is just life. And if you can get on board with that, okay, we're always at a deficit, then it's normal for it to need something. And one of the ways you check in on that is that you just touch base and you talk about it. It's just a maintenance behavior. And it's so important. And it's almost like adopting the growth mindset of relationships. And it's funny because it's like we're teaching this to preschoolers and kindergartners. But when it comes to a romantic relationship, it's like all out the window. So
Right.
I think it's really important we sort of revive that belief system in our committed relationships.
We did an episode recently on family meetings, which were
Yeah.
both with your partner and then sometimes with your kids too. And anyway, we sort of hit on that idea that they need to happen on a regular schedule so that can we talk doesn't mean like, uh-oh, here we go again. She's going to tell
Yes.
me I'm no good and I don't do enough around here. That it's just, oh, it's Tuesday night. It's time for us to sit down. And maybe sometimes there's nothing and maybe sometimes there's things to unpack, but the neutrality of always having something to work on, the idea that this is a continual process, I thought was really, really refreshing. If your relationship always needs something, then you can come to it a little more relaxed instead of I'm failing because my partner has a criticism.
Yes, and I mean the idea of family meetings or relationship meetings is not new. It's in my book too, but it's really one of the best things you can do to maintain your connection in your relationship. And um, I don't want to get into it if you've already talked about this in a previous episode, but I'll just say this one point: a lot of people avoid them because they feel awkward,
Mm-hmm.
and they are. They are awkward. And I just think we have to get over ourselves a little bit. And I liken it to learning a new skill in sports. So our son plays baseball. He need to make some tweaks with his batting stance and his mechanics. And so what does he do? He gets in that batter's box hundreds of times and he makes a tweak and then he'll video it and we'll look at it and we'll assess it and we'll make another tweak. So this skill is mechanical until it will eventually become automatic. And it's the same thing with relationship skills. We just have to do it enough to the point where it becomes automatic. The awkwardness will go away the more that we practice this skill.
Tell us about the ultimate compliment formula. Which this seems
This
to me like an example of something that could start up being a little like, feel a little formulaic and then become just how you do things.
Yeah, it's going to be real awkward at first. Whenever I give an example when I'm speaking live, people are like, oh, like, because it would feel so good, but also, I don't know if you would ever do this, but
Right.
this is really important. Showing gratitude and appreciation is one of the fastest and biggest ways to shift the tone in your relationship. Appreciation and acknowledgement was also the second most asked for thing by women or from their partners around the mental load. So this is really important. So the ultimate compliment formula came about because my husband gave me these very generic compliments that didn't do anything for me. And so I came up with this formula to help him get better at it. So it is observation of something that you see or a personal quality, plus how it makes your life better. So, an example might be something like I notice how much thought you put into snacks for our kids. And I got to tell you, I never even think about them getting hangry. I know they're getting enough nutrition, and I just appreciate how well you care for our family. Stuff like that once a day. Both partners can do this for one another. Once a day will dramatically change your relationship right there.
What about this is something I'm recognized as something I do. It's like, but I already do that. When somebody says that I need you to express appreciation for me and your partner says, I do that. I already do that. What's the right way to rethink that?
I think sometimes, so when I think of needs in relationships, it's usually a need is something that you want added to the relationship, you want subtracted, it's like something to stop, or you want it multiplied. So when we interpret that, we're thinking of it as if they're saying we never do it, when really they might be saying, I just want more of
Hmm.
that thing that you're doing. And that's normal. It's normal to have needs. It's normal to need different things than our partners. And I think we have to remember that when we're on the receiving end. I don't need them to feel love in the same way I do, but it's my job as a partner to express love to my significant other in the ways that move the needle for them. And maybe that is increased appreciation, even though I'm already doing it. I just got to multiply it.
Let's talk about normalizing the slow grow. I loved this idea, and I think it's kind of tied in with what you've been saying that you normalize the work and normalize that it won't be overnight.
Yes, I feel like this is the least sexy thing that I have to say around the mental load. Because whenever I talk with women or I talk with couples, if I could just give them, like, this is what you do and your life is better and you only have to do it once and this is resolved, it would feel so satisfying. But the reality is, it's an unsexy reality, which is that making changes in relationships takes time. So the mental load shifting. So it's almost always one default partner. And so then you're having to kind of walk back these patterns, integrate new ones, learn new information. All of this stuff takes time. And I think we have to normalize that so we can have some grace and some patience as we're making these changes in our relationships. And change always comes with a little bit of a setback. So the new change will happen and it'll get practiced a little bit, and then you'll revert back and you have to kind of adjust, and then the change will happen again. And so it's a normal part of growth. Getting it right the first time is sort of the exception. And so I end the book with giving a meeting agenda. It's called a share meeting, so scheduled home and relationship effort. And one of the main reasons for having this regular place to touch base is so that as you're making changes, you have a forum where you can come together, and it's expected that you talk about what adjustments need to be made, and you can touch base on kind of like if you're sliding back a little bit, and you can talk about this, and it's not going to be hopefully met with any defensiveness.
So I love the ideas of like, this is how you can help your partner who doesn't understand the mental load conceptualize it, contribute, feel less attacked and more wanted. And you talk in the book a lot about how we have to check our ego at the door, how we might need, in order for these things to change, we might need to question some long held beliefs or patterns that we have that we're bringing to things. So let's walk through a little bit of that, because it isn't just like you just need to make him see that he needs to do more and then everything's great. This is two people participating.
These are like the unsafe things to say on social media.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's all right. This is a
you,
safe space.
okay, I'm like, oh, anytime I kind of like dip my toe, I'm like, you can just read the whole book, but I'm not, saying it on
We're
social
team
media is
default
like,
parent, right? We're team default parent here.
we're
So you can
team
say,
default parent.
but
I'm
maybe
always, I mean,
this.
100%. The reality of just relationship dynamics is that once a pattern starts to get established, everybody kind of adjusts to fit that pattern. If you're unhappy in it, things develop, behaviors, attitudes, belief systems develop and can really feed the resentment. And so I just call out a few things. So one in particular I call out are behaviors that backfire. So as we're trying to step into handing off more of the mental load, there are sometimes behaviors that we've kind of just started doing. I've done every single one of them that really shuts down participation. It kind of sours the tone, and ultimately it ensures that we continue to carry stuff. Because again, I'm team default. So it's like, check yourself if you're doing these things so that you can back off, figure out a replacement so that you can facilitate your partner stepping in with more confidence and competence. So for example, one is micromanaging. Maybe it's, we pack the lunches and then we're like all up there. But, this is how you slice the grapes and this is how you do that. And what did you pack? That's too many treats, kind of micromanaging the whole thing. Impatience is another, which that is one of the most common, hey, can you take care of this? Ugh, it took too long. Another is criticism. Thanks for getting the kids dressed. I would never let them out in public in that. What are you doing? Right. So there's 5 of them. And there's always an asterisk here because sometimes there are these patterns of just kind of carelessness. Like, if you have to have really a lot of intensity around and precision around how you pack lunches because of rules at your school, then that might require a conversation. So sometimes you have to have a conversation about it. But a lot of times these are just behaviors we've grown accustomed to engaging in that shut down participation. One of the other big things is we often will create a storyline about our partners that will continue to feed a bad attitude. This makes it hard to ever shift out of resentment. This is a common message I'll get in my DMs, which is, I'm so resentful, I don't know how to get out of it. Mm-hmm. And getting out of it is it's a joint effort, but there is an individual responsibility here as well. And part of that is we have to revise the story we tell ourselves about our partner. So if we are walking around our house and we're like doing that muttering that so many of us moms and women do, we're like, oh, must be nice having a maid. I guess you don't care to keep the house clean. We're like,
because I'm the only one who knows she's the dirty dishes. I guess, right.
Like that, only right. One. I guess you expect me to do it. This is all revealing of the storyline we have created around our significant other. So as they are stepping into making changes, that's the joint responsibility here. As they're stepping into making changes, it's our job to shift the story, give them the opportunity to prove us wrong, make a little bit of space for that. We start to focus on the ways they are showing up and start to kind of revise some of these kind of just tapes that we keep replaying in our heads around how they are continually letting us down.
You say that gracious interpretations lead to good interactions. So
Mhm.
by being gracious, of course, it's hard because when you were
Yeah.
like, I'm sure I'm nuts, he probably totally got the balloons, and I'm going to be completely overbearing if I bring it up and micromanaging. So I'm going to let it be. But I hope he did it. You're trying to be gracious, but it wasn't clear. It wasn't clear to your partner yet what there was. Anyway, it was not your
Yeah.
interpretation that was the problem, but it was your not wanting to seem like a micromanager that maybe made you not ask things sooner.
Yes. And I think this is why the book really does cover a lot, because there is so much nuance around this area of our relationships, because relationships are every single day kind of fluctuating and changing, and our context matters and all these things. So, yeah, gracious interpretations are, if you live in that world most of the time, you'll have much more pleasant interactions, because a lot of times we are more so interacting with these storylines than our partner in reality, which causes us to make conclusions that aren't necessarily true, jump to these assumptions about them, see them in the most negative light. So, yes, that is a better way to exist. But every now and then, the story, me telling myself the story of he didn't remember the balloons is
Mhm.
actually true. And so that's why there's so much nuance around this topic. And being able to then navigate through the conversation when that tension arises potentially becomes a really important skill to develop, which I think the book does a good job of giving some really tangible tools for how to navigate those trickier moments.
Right. And it continues to be tricky and you continue to navigate and there's always a moment and that's part of the work of being in relationship.
Yeah.
You talked too about kids, how kids can participate and you had a really good sort of strategy for getting kids to participate that maybe
Mhm.
was a step away from the chore chart and you riding herd to make sure they fed the dog or whatever. So tell us about the strategy that you've tried.
Yeah, so the goal with kids is that you want to increase initiative taking. And part of what's required for initiative taking is the ability to observe things that need done, to notice them, to see them, and then
Mhm.
to have action associated with it. And so you can do this. The biggest question I get is, how young can you start? So you gotta know your kid, but I'd say you could probably start with as young as 3 or 4, depending on their maturity. But I give the kids a zone of the house, and so it might be the living room. It has to be a shared zone, because there's this regular and ongoing argument of, I didn't get that out, so I don't have to put
Right.
it away.
It's
But
not my
part of,
pillow. Right,
yeah,
right.
it's not mine. Part of being in a family is we're all, I mean, think about how much we're doing day to day that
Yeah,
has nothing to do with stuff we
exactly.
messed up. So part of being in a family is being a team. And so it's a shared part of the home. You give them a zone like the living room. And there's lots of ways that you can kind of implement it depending on your kids. So it might be once a day they have to check their zone, or throughout the day they're in charge of maintaining their zone. So, like picking up the throw pillows that inevitably get tossed on the floor, folding up blankets, picking up the Legos. What I've had to do with my kids is, like, once or twice a day, I'll just say, zone, go see and do. And that just prompts them to head to their spot, and they go check it out, and they take care of anything that's out of place. So we've done, the bathroom they share. My daughter's cleaning up the son's spit, and then we'll switch, and sometime he'll be wiping her stuff down. And so it's a nice way to step out of having to give them a list of things that need done. It's like 3 words. So you're not doing all this talking and explaining. It doesn't almost, I don't know if it's ever prompted any pushback, because it's just kind of like, go to your zone. Like, okay. And they go, they
Right.
take care of it, and it's done. And it's fostering a sense of teamwork in the home, shared responsibility, and also the ability to observe what needs done and actually take care of it.
That's right. Because we hear so much the whole like, well, I don't see the mess, right? Or
Yeah.
they just don't see the mess. And that is a reality that we collectively participate in. But I love this idea. Go notice, right? Go notice what needs to
Yep.
be doing. With my own older kids, that was a real struggle for me. Like, I want you to start noticing. And we're
Yes.
getting to that point. And I think it's a good idea to start before they're teenagers and more likely to disagree and push back with any idea
Yes.
that you might have because you're the one giving it. So I think it's a great idea to start, and I love the idea of a zone instead of go ask mommy how you can HELP, which is the dirty
Yeah,
word,
because
right?
even the chore charts, like I'm not opposed to those or the lists.
Yeah,
What it's still is saying, what we're kind of inserting into their little minds is that we're the owner and we're delegating to them.
yeah,
And that's a belief system that I think culturally we're wanting to shift. And so this
yes.
is a really simple way to shift it in our homes, which can eventually ripple out to make a pretty massive impact as a society.
You say that along the way we can't overdose on appreciation. And this is where I get a little stuck, I think. The whole like, oh, am I really going to thank you for fluffing the throw pillows or remembering to do the thing for once? And when you don't thank me for everything I do all day long, right?
Yeah.
But appreciation is useful. It's useful for a peaceful home.
Yes, and it just doesn't cost us anything.
Mm,
It's funny because I've received messages before where people will say things like, "I'm not going to thank him for emptying the dishwasher because he just should do it," and I just don't. I don't know. To me, I'm like, I don't even get that worldview because don't you want to exist in a relationship where there is a free flowing sense of appreciation? And sometimes we have to give before we get. And a lot of times we don't like to operate like that. We're waiting to get until we're willing to give. And so I'm challenging people in their relationship to increase the appreciation. What often happens is that it takes a minute, but then it starts to come back at you. When you just normalize it, we're just going to thank each other for things. Just because I thank you for emptying the dishwasher doesn't mean that I own the task and you're doing me a favor. It's just I'm acknowledging the effort and the value you're adding to our home. So I would challenge people to increase it as much as possible. Again, there's even research that talks about how showing gratitude in our relationships is one of the fastest ways to shift the tone. So thank them
mm,
for emptying the dishwasher. Thank them for, going to work or picking up the kids or coaching the team. It does not cost us anything. It doesn't devalue all that you do. I think there's these like
right, right.
underlying kind of just like aggravations that we have. Like if I thank them, then it's like, am I not as important as they are? I don't know. There's these sort of like angsty things we sometimes have about it. So it's important to push past that and experiment with it.
Well, I think we
Experiment.
really want to get that appreciation. Well, nobody appreciates me and nobody thanks me, which is kind of true. But the
True.
fastest way to getting that appreciation might be by modeling it.
Yes. Yeah. And I find that, we talk a lot about, I think women are really struggle to assert their needs, but I think men are actually pretty bad at even identifying what they need and speaking them
Mm,
out. And so men will often act as if they don't need appreciation, but it is a big need for men. And so I don't know. I think there's a silent undercurrent sometimes of feeling taken for granted on their side too. And I know as a default parent, we're like, are you kidding me?
oh,
So,
really?
are you serious right now? But I just, again, if your goal is more teamwork, feeling
Right.
like you're on the same page, more softness in your relationship, more emotional security, then give what you're wanting to get. Lean into appreciation and watch what happens as you start to do that in your relationship.
I've been talking to Dr. Morgan Cutlip. Her new book is A Better Share: How Couples Can Tackle the Mental Load for More Fun, Less Resentment, and Great Sex. I've put the link to buy the book in the show notes for this episode, so you can buy it on our bookshop bookstore or wherever you buy books. And Morgan, tell our listeners where else they can find you and your work.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, which is just Dr. Morgan Cutlip. My website is the same, drmorgancutlip.com. And if it's okay, I'll say one more thing about the book because
Sure.
I had this secret agenda of writing a book that men would read.
Uh-huh.
And because ultimately we
We
would
need
like them
buy-in.
to
Right.
we would like them to make the changes. And one of the biggest issues is that women not only carry all of the things, but now we're carrying the responsibility for educating them about this topic and then trying to promote the change and blah, 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 blah. So my secret agenda was I want to write a book that invites men to the conversation so that they receive the information so I can carry that for women. And Both men and women will benefit from reading it, but that was my like secret motive. And it's been really cool seeing the reviews come in. I've heard from women who get the book, unpackage it, put it on their kitchen counter, go run errands, and come back and find their husbands halfway through it. So it's been going really well in terms of men receiving the message and the words in the book. And so I just kind of wanted to put that out there because I think that was a kind of like a gap in the mental load content was,
I
yeah.
totally agree. I agree that it was needed, and I agree that this book does that. You do such a good job of being like, look, this is a two people are bringing this. Here's your maybe misapprehension. Here's what your partner's misapprehension might be. Two sides to every story. You balance it super well, and it both shows
Thank you.
us how to bring our partners into the conversation and allows our partners. It's a great book to read and then share with your partner and say, "I'd love for you to read this," and then I'd love to talk about it.
Yes. And sex on the cover helps.
And sex on the cover is probably an additional selling point.
It was
Morgan, thank you
strategic.
so much. This was a great conversation, and I really appreciate you talking to me today.
Thanks for having me.